Subcommittee on Labor, Health and Human Services, Education and Related Agencies will please come to order. Good morning. Today we are having a hearing on the Biden administration's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of Labor, and I'm happy to welcome Acting Secretary Sue to our subcommittee. As we did last year in the Senate, I'm looking forward to working in a bipartisan manner again this year with Senator Capito to develop a labor HHS bill that can pass the Senate, pass the House, and be signed into law by the President. That means looking for the common ground instead of pursuing partisan policy riders and draconian cuts to workforce development and worker protection programs. When a small minority is able to derail the appropriations process, like House Republicans did last year, repeatedly threatening government shutdowns, it hurts our constituents, our communities, intended to be served by our federal programs. It causes federal agencies to waste time and money instead of working to make sure every dollar is used effectively as intended by the laws we pass here in the Congress. We need to do better, and Acting Secretary, I think this budget is a good first step. Acting Secretary Sue, you join us today to talk about the President's fiscal year 2025 budget for the Department of Labor. We have had 27 months in a row of unemployment below 4%, the longest stretch in 50 years. But I know that we still have more work to do to give Americans the economic security that they need and deserve. Over the last few years, Democrats and Republicans came together to pass landmark legislation that invests in manufacturing, helps us compete against China, invests in our aging infrastructure, and importantly, invests in our workers. And just this week, we are seeing the dividends. In my home state of Wisconsin, Microsoft announced that they will be investing $3.3 billion for an artificial intelligence data center complex, creating thousands of good-paying union jobs and investing in education and job training programs for the next generation. This budget builds on this progress that we have made and will help continue to build a strong economy that works for workers. It proposes investments necessary for training the workforce that we need today and the evolving needs of employers. The budget also requests resources to maintain critical investments in our nation's core workforce training programs. These programs help support workers and their families by providing them with access to high-quality training programs as they seek to grow their careers. This includes programs to improve our nation's public workforce system, boost our community college system, help ex-offenders land on their feet, and address the employment and training needs of Native Americans, migrant and seasonal workers, and other workers. High-quality workforce training programs are a proven path to accessing a job that pays a good wage and has good benefits. And I am pleased that this budget continues to support these important programs. The budget also includes a proposed increase in funding for the Registered Apprenticeship Program. I have been proud to lead the effort to reauthorize the National Apprenticeship Act with my colleague, Senator Lisa Murkowski, and I'm pleased that the department is proposing to expand apprenticeships and increase opportunities for individuals who have historically not had access to apprenticeship program, including women, people of color, and underrepresented groups. Apprenticeship programs provide technical instruction and on-the-job learning experiences to ensure that workers are well prepared for jobs. According to the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, employers in Wisconsin train around 10,000 registered apprenticeships in nearly 200 occupations every year. Supporting the federal Registered Apprenticeship Program will help Wisconsin and other states continue to strengthen and grow their apprenticeship programs. The budget includes funds for the Department of Veterans Employment and Training Service, which provides workforce training services for our nation's veterans and separating service members. These resources help ensure that our service members can transfer the skills that they learned serving our country to land a family-supporting job and help them successfully transition into the workforce. The department's Vets Office provides critical services to military spouses as they make the transition to civilian life. And I look forward to hearing more about how the President's budget request would support the workforce and training needs of veterans and their families. Acting Secretary Sue, I'm also pleased to see the increased investment in the wage and hour division. The proposed $35 million increase is needed to recover the hard-earned wages owed to workers stolen by their employers. Last year, Wage and Hours was able to recover more than $156 million in federal minimum wage and overtime owed to more than 135,000 workers. In Wisconsin, wage and hour investigations last year identified more than $3 million in back wages owed to over 1,400 workers. This funding is also critical to enforcing child labor laws and ensuring that when youth are working, they are doing so safely and appropriately. There has been extensive recent reporting of egregious incidences of child labor violations. As long as corporations think that they can ignore federal child labor laws, kids will continue to be put at risk, including 13-year-olds working overnight shifts in slaughterhouses and meatpacking facilities. Wage and hours staffing has fallen to historic lows, and I believe we must provide an increase for the agency's important work. The budget request also includes an additional $23 million for the vital work of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We've just marked Workers' Memorial Day on April 28th, remembering workers who've died or been injured while on the job. Our latest fatality statistics indicate that there were 5,486 fatal workplace injuries in 2022. Up nearly 6% from the prior year. That's 5,486 too many. We must do better for workers, and I believe the proposed increase would move us in the right direction. The proposed $15 million increase for the Employee Benefits Security Administration would help secure workplace-based benefits workers and their families are owed. I'm also pleased to see the increased investment of $46 million for the Bureau of International Labor Affairs that would help strengthen implementation of labor commitments of our trading partners and combat international forced labor, including in China. We can and must strengthen the economic security of our communities at home by our government working to eliminate labor abuses abroad. Acting Secretary Sue, thank you for being here today to talk about the Department of Labor's important work. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Ranking Member Capito for her opening remarks. And following her opening remarks, we will hear directly from you, Acting Secretary Sue. And after that, senators will each have 5 minutes for a round of questions. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Chair Baldwin. And thank you for having the hearing. This is the first labor budget hearing that we've actually had since we took over the reins of the Labor HHS Subcommittee. So Acting Secretary Sue, thank you for coming. You did not appear last year in part because the budget came out right as Secretary Walsh was leaving the department. So thank you for being here today to describe the fiscal year 2025 budget priorities for the Department of Labor. First of all, I will say I have had some concerns with the department. There seems to be an agenda to push new regulations that impose layers of red tape and in some cases hurt worker choice. West Virginia needs fewer inefficient and expensive regulations and more job creation. To be clear, not all regulations are bad. I applaud efforts to curb child labor violations that the chair was talking about and to keep hard-working West Virginians, including our minors, safe. So thank you for your efforts there. But this Department of Labor should be focused on workforce training and creating new jobs, not mandating new burdens that take away worker choice and flexibility. For example, the Wage and Hour Division earlier this year changed the rules governing who qualifies as an independent contractor. This new rule imposes a complicated 6-factor test that allows bureaucrats to decide who is and is not an independent contractor, jeopardizing the ability of 27 million Americans to work in a way that best fits their needs and schedules. This regulation takes away the freedom for West Virginia real estate agents, truck drivers, freelance workers, and other self-employed workers to choose their own hours and work around other life priorities, such as going back to school or taking care of your children, raising the children. Another regulation that creates more complexity and undermines workers' livelihood is the so-called ESG investment rule. This rule allows and even pressures retirement fund fiduciaries to consider environmental, social, and governance factors in their investment decisions involving workers' hard-earned life savings. West Virginians who work today and save for tomorrow need to be able to optimize their returns to afford life in retirement. But this rule pressures financial experts to shift potential gains away from American retirees and into the White House's radical climate agenda. And just last month, your department further curbed worker flexibility and imposed sweeping new costs on businesses by drastically increasing the overtime salary threshold. Starting July 1st, West Virginia businesses of all sizes, including nonprofits and small businesses, will have to figure out how to absorb this mandate. This costly change is likely to result in fewer hours worked and more restrictions for employees, and in some cases, even layoffs. Instead of doubling down on this agenda, the Department of Labor should focus instead on job creation in areas of bipartisan support. One area, and the chair also talked about this, where I hope we can find some room for agreement is with the apprenticeship programs. This budget requests an increase of $50 million over fiscal year 2024 for the apprenticeship grant program. While I'm concerned that your budget would use these apprenticeship grant funding to support a green jobs agenda, I remain committed to increasing opportunities for West Virginia to succeed and know apprenticeships can play a key role in that mission. I support registered apprenticeship programs, which is why I'm also concerned about the department's proposal released late last year to completely overhaul the regulations governing the registered apprenticeship program. These proposed changes will make an already complex system even more difficult for employers to navigate. And I think it could reduce registered apprenticeship opportunities for workers across the country. There are a lot of worthy apprenticeship opportunities that don't fit the current registered apprenticeship model. I'd like to see the innovation to expand those apprenticeship opportunities to new programs and fields. In 2022, I secured funding for Marshall University to establish an apprenticeship initiative through Apprenticeships Works to train West Virginians to compete for good-paying long-term jobs across the state. I've also been a longtime champion of expanding and strengthening the early childhood education workforce through apprenticeships. Giving our educators a clear path to successful careers opens the doors to higher quality and better coverage of care, helping both families and child care workers in our state. The Department of Labor should be focused on strengthening workforce development strategies that help all Americans get the skills they need to succeed. Acting Secretary Sue, I hope you will work with this Congress on that goal as we work through the fiscal year 2025 process. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Senator Capito. Our witness today is Julie Sue, the Acting Secretary of the Department of Labor. Acting Secretary Sue, thank you for joining us. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and you may begin.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Baldwin, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of President Biden's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of Labor. As the Acting Secretary of Labor, I get to travel the country to meet with workers. Workers like Mariah, a single mom who was living paycheck to paycheck, worried every day about how she would have enough to get by. She went to her local social services office to apply for SNAP and Medicaid benefits, and that's where she noticed a flyer for a job training program in the pipe trades. Today, Mariah is in a good union job, and she has quadrupled her income. What struck me about Mariah was not just how much a good income meant to her. It was the pride she felt in putting in a hard day's work and getting rewarded for it, and the pride she saw in her children's eyes. It's undeniable. Good jobs change lives. This $13.9 billion request will help more people like Mariah get good jobs that can support families, lift up communities, and bring the dignity and pride that are core to the American dream. I want to frame our request under two priority areas. First, pathways to good jobs for all of America's workers. I've met with thousands of workers like Mariah who are in programs that work, programs that exist because we've invested in them. That's why we're requesting investments to develop and expand proven models, as Chairwoman Baldwin said, to connect workers to the good jobs they want and need, and employers to the workers that they want and need. For example, we're requesting $8 billion for the Career Training Fund. That investment would help as many as 750,000 people who do not see four-year college as their path enroll in evidence-based, high-quality training programs for actual jobs in their communities. Workers who complete high-quality programs don't end up with a job search. They end up with a good job. We also seek $335 million for apprenticeship programs. Registered apprenticeships provide training for the actual skills that employers need. They allow workers to earn while they learn, and they increase job pathways for underrepresented groups, including women, people of color, veterans, and individuals with disabilities. When I talk to business owners, many tell me that their top concern is recruiting and retaining workers. Well, the investments in our budget request are how Congress and the Department of Labor can tap into the talents and skills of all of America's workers and make sure that the supply of skilled workers meets the demand right now and well into the future. The second priority I'd like to highlight is the Department of Labor's mission to protect workers, including and especially those most vulnerable to exploitation. Too often, employers who hire 13-year-olds to work in hazardous conditions fail to pay workers overtime for 60-hour work weeks, or who put workers at risk of losing their limbs or even their lives on the job, do it because they believe they'll get away with it, that no one will stop them, that they can operate in blatant disregard of the laws that Congress has passed. Not on our watch. That's why we're requesting modest but important increases for the department's worker protection agencies. Because we can't do this vital work without dedicated public servants, the wage and hour investigators who combat child labor, the team that ensures workplaces are free from safety hazards, the benefits advisors who answer the phone when panicked patients have been denied coverage for mental health services by their health insurance company. We're asking for $7.5 million for additional staff to combat wage theft and child labor, an additional $23 million to investigate high-hazard workplaces, protect whistleblowers, and give employers compliance assistance, and an additional $10.7 million for my solicitor's office, which has been essentially flat-funded for more than a decade. The President's request would also help us advance worker rights and promote a level playing field internationally for U.S. workers and businesses. And it would better support implementation of Congress's Secure 2.0 Act, the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, and the No Surprises Act. Because when Congress passes laws, we should make them real. In all, this budget request will help make sure that workers can come home safe and healthy at the end of the workday and get high-quality jobs with the power to truly change lives. Again, I thank the subcommittee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Acting Secretary Sue. We will now begin a round of 5-minute questions, starting with myself and then Senator Capito. Acting Secretary Sue, I am deeply troubled by CNH Industrial's recent decision to lay off over 200 workers at a facility in Racine, Wisconsin, and move production to Mexico. Agricultural machinery has been made by workers in my home state for over 175 years. They have made Case New Holland into the international manufacturing powerhouse that it is today. Even after delivering record profits for the company, plant workers at Racine are being told that their services are too expensive and are no longer welcome. An average worker at the Racine plant earns $52,000 annually. CNH spent over $652 million in stock buybacks last year, or 4 times more than the $150 million they hope to save by reducing their workforce. Moving production to Mexico would not only be a slap in the face to the workers who have given so much, but it would destroy the institutional knowledge that the plant's workforce has developed over decades of building agricultural equipment. American workers are the best in the world, yet they face unfair disadvantages when it comes to competing against low-road employers in other countries, engaging in a race to the bottom and exploiting workers. So can you start by expanding on how the budget would promote a fair global playing field and protect workers' paychecks here at home by advancing workers' rights abroad?
Chairwoman Baldwin, thank you so much, and thank you also for your opening comments about the President's announcement yesterday in Racine, which demonstrates that the race to the bottom is not the only option. We can, with the right investments, create a race to the top in which America's workers benefit, America's businesses benefit, and our economy and our country are stronger. To your question, one of our agencies is ILAB, the International Labor Affairs Bureau. And the premise behind ILAB is the idea that the interests and welfare of working people in other countries is intricately tied to the welfare of workers in the United States. Too often, I also hear what you've just suggested, which is companies saying that if we demand that workers do well in this country, we're going to take our work to another country in which there are even more vulnerable workers. And the work of ILAB is intended to create a more level playing field. ILAB engages in research and advocacy to make sure that conditions like child labor and forced labor in other countries are not condoned, that when goods that are made in such conditions try to enter the United States, that we do not allow that. We have also been very engaged in helping to monitor and assist the country of Mexico in implementation of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement that would help make sure that workers in Mexico also have their fair and free choice to join a union and to protect their working conditions. Again, so that we really end the race to the bottom, as you mentioned.
Thank you for that answer. While we appreciate this important work to level the global playing field and discourage companies from moving jobs out of the United States in the first place, we also recognize the critical needs of these workers who are faced with losing their jobs unless CNH decides to reverse course. So I'd like to follow up on the WARN Act. This is an important law that, if followed, can help communities plan to provide services to workers affected by mass layoffs. Unfortunately, as in the case with CNH, not every company complies with WARN, and Department of Labor's authority to enforce the law needs to be strengthened. Will you work with me to explore how Congress can strengthen the WARN Act this Congress?
Yes, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. We've discussed my desire to secure increased protections from workplace violence, especially for our nation's nurses. Unfortunately, nurses continue to suffer from rising levels of workplace violence. A 2023 report from National Nurses United found that nearly 1 in 5 nurses have changed or left their jobs due to workplace violence. With Wisconsin facing a projected shortage of 20,000 nurses by the year 2040, we must do all that we can to protect, retain, and strengthen the nursing workforce. I know the department has taken some steps towards issuing a proposed rule on workplace violence in healthcare and social assistance. Can you update us on the actions the department is taking now to provide all nurses the protections from workplace violence that they deserve, and describe your efforts to accelerate the issuance of this proposed workplace violence standard?
Yes, thank you so much, Chairwoman Baldwin. So, as you note, workplace violence is too often the reality for many in our healthcare settings. I recently made a trip where I met in a community in which there was a home healthcare nurse who had been killed on the job. And I also meet with nurses, including those in nursing programs, who are passionate and want to do the job, but recognize that violence is a reality that they should face and that they have to face, and that should simply not be the case. This also points to something that we believe really deeply at the Department of Labor, which is that sometimes labor shortages or people not staying in jobs that they're trained for and want to do is a result of job quality issues, and we need to make sure that every job is a good job. So our efforts include creating a workplace standard that would help to reduce and hopefully eliminate the incidence of workplace violence when it comes to healthcare workers. We have gone through the initial, the small business review process, which is always something that our OSHA rules require, and we are doing everything we can to issue a notice rule as soon as we can.
Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Acting Director Sue, I wanted to ask about two of the rules that I brought up in my opening statement. The overtime rule, I'd like to start with that. You finalized that regulation just 2 weeks ago, the new level of 59,000. And let me ask you a technical question here really quickly, because I was talking to somebody who called me about this who's going to be deeply affected. That 59,000 goes up, right, to another figure shortly? Is that correct?
So thank you very much. And actually, if I could just say one thing, Ranking Member, I know you mentioned some of the workforce investments in West Virginia. We also have a Strengthening Community Colleges grant for West Virginia University Parkersburg, which is about nursing, so it kind of connects the 2 points. So thank you for the question about overtime. Basically, what will happen is in July, there will be, using the current methodology, a bump up in the overtime to 14,888.
35 to 59, 65% increase.
The new methodology will not kick in until January 1 of next year.
And that's projected to be 75,000, is that correct?
No, that's the 58,000. 565. That's the 58,000. So this is an example of how when we get comments, we really pay attention to them. And so in several of our rules, we're giving employers some ramp up time in order to comply. So the July 1st ramp is using the current methodology, not the new methodology. It's a smaller bump. And the bump to the $58,000 based on the 35th percentile methodology is going to affect on January 1 of the fall.
So we've gotten a lot of comments for this because of, as I mentioned, threatening to reduce worker flexibility with little or no effect of what actually employees are going to take home. It threatens, we're hearing from nonprofits and colleges and universities who are concerned that they may have to raise tuition, curb flexibilities, career development opportunities. I mean, how do you justify a 65% increase in this when it was just increased, I guess, 4 years ago under the Trump administration? Is that correct?
So, Ranking Member Capito, one of the fundamental jobs of the Department of Labor is to make sure that we are protecting and looking out for the well-being of workers. Because the overtime threshold has been eroded over time, there were too many workers who basically were working over 40 hours a week and not being compensated for it. And some of this was happening through things like, giving people titles of managers or supervisors when they were actually doing basic frontline work. Our effort in raising the overtime threshold was to make sure that the overtime law in the Fair Labor Standards Act remains meaningful.
So I would have to say, did you get a lot of pushback on this when you had your comments, when you put your first rule out? You had to have for a lot of smaller businesses. I don't know how they're going to keep track of all this.
We did. So we engaged. We had several sessions. We did 27 virtual listening sessions around the country that had more than 2,000 participants in 2022. And then we conducted 9 separate listening sessions with small business stakeholders. It's important for us to engage and to listen. Then I think we received something like 33,000 comments on that rule.
Right, I would imagine.
And then we respond to those comments. And again, one of the reasons for the 2-tiered implementation was because we heard what the impact would be and wanted to make sure that especially small businesses had time to implement. The other thing I want to mention, Ranking Member, is that we also provide as much assistance as possible when implementing new rules like this. So we have we have charts, we have small business compliance assistance tools, and we stand ready to assist employers that need it in your state.
Okay, so let me just make sure I get the process here, because I was a little confused. It does go to the 58,000 on July 1st under the old methodology?
No.
No.
It will go.
Stays at the same level. It doesn't do that until January 1st, correct?
It will bump up to 40. Give me 1 second. It'll bump up.
It's coming
slightly,
right behind you. It's coming.
It'll bump up slightly on July 1st using the existing methodology just applied to the current wage rates.
Okay.
It's basically a math equation.
Right, and then it goes to
updated.
the 58 in, so full compliance is not until January.
Exactly.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I did want to ask about the independent contractor rule, but I'll just submit that to you respond in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito. Senator Shaheen.
Good morning. Thank you for being here, Acting Secretary Sue. I know it won't surprise you to hear that one of the issues I hear frequently about from our small businesses in New Hampshire is their difficulty in finding seasonal workers and using the H-2B visa program. New Hampshire has consistently, for as long as I can remember since COVID, had an unemployment rate that's below 3%. Right now, the March adjusted rate was 2.6%. A year ago, it was below 2%. We can't find the workers we need, and in a state where we rely on tourism, it's our second largest industry, we need those seasonal workers. We need those H-2B visa workers. And one of the things that we're hearing is that, as you know, before employers can apply to the Department of Homeland Security for the visa, they have to be approved by the Department of Labor to certify that there are no U.S. workers who can fill those jobs. They've had trouble getting that certification because of processing delays at the Department of Labor. What are you doing to address that? And what do we need to do to adjust this budget to make sure you have the funding you need to help make sure we can approve the people who need these workers to run their businesses?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Senator. So I understand the importance of the H-2B program in your state and in many others and in multiple industries across the country. This is a program that has grown in demand. In fact, in the first 4 days of January of this year, we had an application for more visas, 4 times the number of visas than the maximum number. So recognize just how just how dire the need is. I have also focused since I came as Deputy Secretary in 2021 on everything we can do to improve our operational, the functioning of how we process. And I have heard that there have been improvements in processing. I'm very happy to talk to you further about those who continue to struggle in your home state, Senator. But one thing I will say is that the way that the Department of Labor is funded to process these claims has no relationship to the number of claims that we get. So as the number has gone up, we have remained flat funded.
That's why I'm asking
Yes.
what you need in this budget in order to move those approvals, because I think it's a 2-part process. One is getting workers certified, but the other is we don't have enough H-2B visas in the program. We're looking at a nationwide unemployment rate, as you pointed out yourself, which is a good problem to have, but we're not producing enough workers to fill the jobs that we're creating.
Yeah.
And we got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And DOL's role in ensuring that there are enough H-2B visas available to employers is really critical.
Yes, yes, and my team has been very hard at work to try to address that. Our budget request does include $1.8 million to add staffing for processing. Keep in mind that is because our overall budget request comes in under the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
Right.
I mean, I'm very happy to explore with you other options. One that has been floated in the past is having the Department of Labor get some of the fees that are submitted in order to again, level up when the numbers increase, but I would be very happy to work with you on other creative ideas to make sure that we can process.
Thank you, I appreciate that. In New Hampshire, we have a federal prison called FCI Berlin. that has really struggled with recruiting and retaining qualified corrections officers and other employees that they need. And part of the problem is that there's a lack of parity in salaries that are offered by local agencies and firms who compete with companies in the region, and FCI Berlin falls within the rest of U.S. pay locality, and the locality pay program has simply failed to keep pace with local salaries in the area. Now, we've been told that establishing a new pay area for the Berlin micropolitan statistical area would help address this issue. However, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has said that the current wage survey model is not capable of producing reliable salary estimates for micropolitan statistical areas or rural counties. So how can we encourage the Bureau of Labor Statistics to explore ways to address this? Because we have so many rural areas, not only in New Hampshire, but across the country, where this is a huge problem, where people are competing with an area like, well, we get thrown in with Boston, and there's a big difference between what's happening in New Hampshire with pay and what's happening in the Boston area. So what can you tell us that the Bureau of Labor Statistics could do to help us deal with this problem?
Thank you, Senator. This is definitely an issue that we are seeing, as you noted, and as the chairwoman noted. This is a moment in which there's a tight labor market, and it is resulting in workers with more choice and employers needing to recruit and retain, and including competing on wages. This has had some positive impact in terms of workers and their wages, especially one thing we've seen since President Biden came into office is real wages rise, especially for low and middle income Americans. And that means more money in the pockets of working families. But to your point, I'm happy to work with you to figure out what we need to do.
And I appreciate, we want workers to do better, but the federal government has to keep up with that pay scale as well. And right now, we're not doing that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Shaheen. Senator Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Acting Secretary Sue, in December, the Department of Labor proposed significant and controversial changes to the national apprenticeship system. Among other issues, the proposed rules would eliminate apprenticeship programs that base program completion on the mastery of skills rather than an explicit time requirement. Competency-based apprenticeship programs are a very important part of the system in Maine, particularly in the areas of healthcare, information technology, and education. In Maine, we found that competency-based programs often have a higher success rate than time-based or hybrid programs. Over the past 4 years, the percentage of apprentices that failed to complete either hybrid or time-based apprenticeship programs was almost double those of competency programs. So I don't understand why the administration made the decision to remove competency-based approaches to apprenticeships. Could you explain what the rationale was?
Thank you, full committee ranking member Collins. It's good to see you. As I think there's wide agreement here that registered apprenticeships are a proven and effective model of helping employers get the skilled and competent employees that they need, and to create opportunity for people who might not otherwise have seen themselves in jobs or be able to stop what they're doing and get the training that they need for another job. We know that the earn and learn model works for that. Since this administration has been in office, we have expanded those apprenticeship programs in numerous industries, including all of the ones that you mentioned, in healthcare, in IT, and in education. We now have teacher apprenticeships in over 30 states. And we need to continue to expand that. That's part of our budget request. I think if you're referring to our proposed rule about this, Our goal is not to limit the options for expanding registered apprenticeships. It is to make sure that those programs continue to have the standards that have made them so successful overall. And to make sure that when somebody finishes with an apprenticeship program, the employer knows that what they're going to get is somebody who has all the capabilities, including the experience and experiential learning that is needed to actually succeed in the job, to perform it, but also to keep themselves safe and healthy while doing it.
But the way that you do that is to measure their competency, not require an arbitrary amount of time. I know I have just a little time, so let me switch to a different issue. First, very quickly, I agree with the comments that Senator Shaheen made on H-2B visas. Those are absolutely critical in my state, where 10 times the state's population visits Maine. And I hope that you will be recommending to the Department of Homeland Security that it make available the full additional 64,716 H-2B visas for this fiscal year. I want to switch to another issue that I'm hearing a lot about in the state of Maine from our firefighters and our first responders. And that has caused me to focus on aspects of the new emergency response standard proposed by OSHA in February. When I talk to my small rural volunteer fire departments, they have huge concerns about the compliance costs, the potential training requirements that this proposed standard would entail. And indeed, OSHA itself has estimated nationwide compliance costs could exceed $100 million per year for volunteer fire departments alone. When I talk to the larger cities in Maine, there are fewer problems with complying with the standards. As your department finalizes this standard, will you commit to working with small, rural, volunteer fire departments to ensure that we don't essentially force them to close down, which would hurt public safety rather than help it?
Yes, thank you. So just going back quickly to the H-2B caps, in this administration, we have used the discretion given to the Department of Homeland Security in partnership with us to make sure that we are meeting the needs that you've mentioned within the discretion that we do have. Obviously, Congress has the ultimate authority on the cap. Yes, I will definitely commit to you that we will work with all stakeholders, but especially what you're saying, the voluntary and rural first responder forces that are so vital, both to make sure that we hear them and that we produce a standard that keeps them safe as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Collins. Chair Murray.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Baldwin. Thank you, Acting Secretary Sue, for coming here, joining us today. DOL has a really crucial charge, and that is protecting workers who are truly the backbone of our economy. It should not be controversial to say that we want all of our workers to have good wages and benefits and fair treatment from their employer and safe workplaces. And the department does crucial work on those issues, cracking down on wage theft, ensuring workplace safety, and even in some cases fighting discrimination. So I'm really pleased you're here today to talk about what resources you need to support your work and support our workers. Let me start with a topic that I've been particularly concerned about: the rise in child labor. The number of children and youth found employed in violation of federal law has risen 88% since 2019. In my home state of Washington, a record number of businesses have been fined for violating child labor laws in recent years. Senator Casey and I actually introduced the Child Labor Act to help combat child labor and strengthen the law. And I know that DOL is already doing a lot to enforce our existing child labor protections. Can you talk with us about what the funding levels in your budget request would mean in real terms for child labor outreach and enforcement efforts?
Thank you so much, Full Committee Chair Murray, and it's very good to see you. And thank you for raising this very important issue. As I think everybody knows, we have seen a rise in child labor. Part of the reason is because the Department of Labor is doing our job. We are exposing these practices, we are putting a stop to them, we are issuing penalties and using the full authority that we have, not just penalties, but using hot goods and other ways to ensure that goods that are touched by child labor are not, companies are not able to profit from it. So our budget request includes an overall increase of $35 million for the wage and hour division, with $7.5 million of that for child labor. We also have to keep in mind that our solicitor's office, the attorneys who advise on cases, who brings litigation to drive home the seriousness of enforcement, are also funded, and so both of those are part of the funding request, and we simply cannot stop the scourge of what we see, which has already been mentioned, right? 13-year-olds working on the kill floor of a meatpacking plant on the night shift with dangerous chemicals, or a 16-year-old who recently died at a sawmill. It's unconscionable that this is happening, and the Department of Labor often stands as the most important bulwark against those kinds of practices. And so our budget request is meant to stay within the bounds of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, but also increase our capacity to address this.
So you're asking for funds for both the Wage and Hour Division and the Office of Solicitor working together to combat this. Thank you. I think that's so important. Another issue that I've been very focused on is combating wage theft. Workers deserve to be paid the full wages they earned, but unfortunately some companies in the country are denying workers tens of billions of dollars in hard-earned pay each year. I actually introduced the Wage Theft Prevention and Wage Recovery Act to put money back into workers' pockets by protecting their right to fair and timely pay and strengthening accountability for wage theft violations. I'm going to keep working on that, but I wanted to ask you today, what is the Department of Labor doing right now to fight wage theft?
So this is one of the most important things that we do, is to make sure that every worker gets a just day's pay for a hard day's work. We see violations of, basic failure to pay the minimum wage. The majority of violations we see when it comes to wage theft is in overtime, so workers not being paid when they work over 40 hours. And we have, our investigators are in the field every single day uncovering these kinds of violations. It should be, I think, obvious to many that for employers who choose to violate the basic labor laws, they will go to great lengths to prevent those practices from being found. And so it's very important for the department to be able to gain the trust of workers to learn about what is going on, to be able to do inspections at the workplace, to, for example, be able to see whether records are being kept and what exactly is going on in the workplace. For those employers who've decided that it's cheaper to break the law and the chances of getting caught are slim, and the consequences, even if they do get caught, are minimal, we need to tell them that that is not the proper way we're not going to allow those kinds of violations. And it's also very important, we hear this often, is from other employers in that industry who are complying with the law, need to know that the Department of Labor will help them ensure a level playing field.
So there's fair competition. Exactly. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Next, Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Chairwoman Baldwin and Ranking Member Capito, and thank you for being here also as well, Acting Secretary Sue. Mississippi, like the rest of the country, and that we've all had these discussions, is facing a pretty tough labor crisis. And the widening gap between jobs available to Mississippians and the career routes being chosen. Despite there being many positions offering significantly above average wages, there's a huge shortage in our state of plumbers, electricians, diesel mechanics, utility linemen, HVAC technicians, precision manufacturing, and many, many skilled jobs. Without more people pursuing these jobs, our workforce participation rate will continue to decline. Average income increases will stall, and our economic health will suffer as we struggle to reach our economic potential. But from my conversations with training providers, state officials, community organizers, and employers, this shortage is not the result of a lack of opportunity or training resources. Rather, it is largely an issue of awareness and perception with these jobs. Many people exploring their career options are not aware of the high wages, good benefits, and the long-term stability these occupations provide. It's almost a little bit of a stigmatism. And if they are aware, there is a misguided view these occupations are less desirable. And that's really, really sad. But what is your stance on the importance of funding or supporting efforts to increase awareness of these jobs and their benefits and to decrease any negative perceptions that may surround them?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Senator. I also understand tomorrow's your birthday, so happy early birthday.
Thank you very much.
I could not agree more with what you are saying, and I see that also when I travel the country, that we do have to overcome a certain perception, both of the quality of the jobs, and again, in this moment, when there are such historic investments in infrastructure, in manufacturing, in clean energy, in good jobs in every community, I think the reality is that these are good quality jobs. The other part of this is that, one of the things I hear is that we need to do a better job of also aligning our educational system with this message. Too many young people hear that, your only path, the only right path is to go to a four-year college. And I meet with people across the country who say that's just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to, gain a trade. And so making sure that our overall, those of us who are, trusted messengers to young people are also saying there is another path, and this is a viable path, is very, very important. I hear from people who are, let's say they're finishing an apprenticeship program or they're in a career trade, who say, if I had known that this was available to me years ago, I could have started on this secure path with a good job, with benefits, with retirement a long time ago. So we do have work to do there. I am very anxious to work with you on that. It's something that we're working on across the administration, something that, for example, Secretary Cardona and I talk about as well. And everywhere I go, I try to raise awareness about that issue. I do think the added investments in actual training programs that reach communities that have been left out in the past would also help to create a climate in which people understand that these are real options for them.
Yeah, and we have great training centers. I mean, we're not lacking that at all. It's just getting the students in there with the pride of being in there. And I know that's kind of hard to buy. But in addition to getting the word out about the potential careers, it's also important to properly train, and I'm pleased that the department is seeking an increase in the strengthening community college training grant programs. And for fiscal year 2025, we have some great community college system that does an outstanding job of targeting specific needs for our state. And many of the community colleges in Mississippi continue to work with companies to fill the training gaps in manufacturing and the technical jobs so we can continue to produce a ready, well-trained workforce. But will you commit to making sure these grants continue to go to deserving community colleges in rural states so they can continue to fill the workforce gaps across all sectors?
Yes, absolutely. And our budget request does include a modest increase in our strengthened community college grants. And 100% they are key to the overall workforce system and one way that young people and mid-career people hear about opportunities that they might not have had and have the ability to gain the skills in the classroom that match the skills they're going to need in the workplace. 100%.
Okay, I'm over my time. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hyde-Smith. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here, and thanks for your great work and the way you engage with Congress, even when members disagree with you. It's always substantive and respectful, and I just wanted to observe that it's not that easy to do, so good job on that. I just want to quickly agree with Senator Murray about the Office of the Solicitor, especially as it relates to child labor. We can disagree about a lot, but the law already exists and it is not sufficiently enforced. You've got around 100 meritorious cases that we are unable to prosecute per month, and there's a solution to that. We don't need a new statute. But I actually want to talk to you about an area where we do need a new statute. Senator Young and I also have a child labor bill that does something a fair amount more narrow than Senator Murray and Senator Casey, and that is simply crank up those penalties. As you know, it is $68,801 maximum penalty for a child labor violation that results in the death of a child. 68 grand is what we have in federal statute. And so not only have companies made the judgment that between the Office of the Solicitor and overall resources for the department that they may not get caught, but even if they get caught, it's not that expensive, and it can be booked as a cost of doing business. If a child dies on a factory floor, it's 68 grand, capped. So, I'm sorry to take such a long time to wind up, but I'd like you to talk about the practical impact of those penalties and what would happen if those penalties were turned up to the point where it was, a real financial hit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator. I mean, I can't say it better than you've already said it. When employers feel like breaking the law can just be a cost of doing business because the consequences, even when they're caught, are so minimal, the incentives to comply are too poor. And we do everything we can at the Department of Labor through our investigative resources to expose illegal practices, to hold all of the companies who are responsible accountable. But we do appreciate the efforts of Congress in light of all of the attention to child labor and the cases that we continue to see to do everything in your power to help make it more costly for those who break the law.
Thank you very much. And I guess I just want to reiterate this point. It's labor, right? So we're going to have a difference of opinion on a lot of things about independent contractors and about union organizing and regulatory questions. But I think we can all agree that there's no justification for a violation of federal law being so inexpensive as to not be a disincentive. And so this is something that I just think we ought to fix. We can either pass it by consent or in some other must-pass piece of legislation, but this is not the kind of thing that ought to get caught up in our pretty fundamental ideological disagreements. Speaking of fundamental ideological disagreements, here I move on to the Women's Bureau. I am continually impressed. And I have to say, I talk to my staff, and I'm always suspicious about bureaus because our tendency on our side of the aisle is to identify a problem and then establish a bureau for the thing we want to see fixed. And so they had to persuade me that this Women's Bureau was not just 7 people in a bunch of cubicles, but boy, they've done really important work. And I'd like you to just spend a little bit of time talking about what the Women's Bureau has done for the workforce and for women in the workforce.
Thank you very much for that, Senator. So I think it's important to say that in many ways, women have helped to power the economic recovery that we have seen in this country. Last month, the labor force participation rate for prime-age working women reached an all-time high, a high since we started collecting this data, which was back in 1948 when Harry Truman was elected president. So the role of women in this economy simply cannot be overstated. At the same time, we have much more work to do to tap into the full potential of women in the economy. And one of the studies that the Women's Bureau put out that I think is so important to note here is that if our country invested in care, in a care infrastructure, and policies that support care, like national paid leave, then about 5 million more women could enter the workplace, and that would result in $775 billion worth of economic activity a year. So Women's Bureau's research and work in this space helps to tell us not just what policy, the impact of policies, but also what's happening when we don't invest in policies. The other piece that Women's Bureau puts out are grants called WANTO. They're Women Apprentices in Non-Traditional Occupation. And it is meant to make sure that women see themselves in some of these good jobs that are being created that they have been underrepresented in for a very long time. I also feel like I need to say, because you asked about the Women's Bureau and it's almost Mother's Day, that I want to thank all the working mothers who do this work. And our Women's Bureau is very much about continuing to lift up their voices and their stories and opportunities for them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Acting Secretary, welcome. Part of your job, Madam Acting Secretary, is to protect and support employees, is it not?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe that we should protect, do you believe passionately that we should protect and support our employees?
I am passionate about that, sir, yes.
Okay. Do you believe that we should passionately protect and support our employees at the FDIC?
I do believe that all employees should be entitled to fair pay and come home healthy and safe.
Including the FDIC?
Yes.
Okay. Have you read the recent outside report, 234 pages, about the creepy old men at the FDIC?
I have not seen that, Senator.
Have you heard about it?
I have not.
Are you curious about it?
Yes, I am, sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the report, the people who conducted the report, Madam Acting Secretary, and I'm surprised you haven't followed it, asked employees at the agency to phone in complaints. There's 6,000 employees, 500, almost 1 out of 10 employees phoned in complaints. Many of them were sexual complaints, sexual discrimination complaints. One young woman said, my supervisor continuously sends me text messages with photographs of his penis. Is that a labor violation?
I mean, it's horrible.
Well, another employee, an Hispanic employee, said my supervisor required me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance because he said I had to prove I'm an American. Is that a labor violation?
I think, Senator, everything that you're saying is not acceptable in the workplace.
Okay.
The technical question about labor violation is, I know, they fall under various statutes, but yes.
One young woman said, my supervisor sent me a text message saying, quote, "Get naked, bitch." Is that a violation, labor violation?
I think it's unacceptable workplace behavior, certainly.
It's pretty bad. One young woman said, my supervisor regularly commented on my breasts and my legs and about his sex life. Is that a labor violation?
I think it's unacceptable behavior.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, isn't it? One young woman sent in a complaint and said, one of my supervisors asked me the following question, quote, "Does your husband eat you?" Close quote. Is that a labor violation?
I mean, it's unacceptable behavior. It's disgusting.
Well, what do you plan on doing about it? Don't you think that that all of the senior management at the FDIC should resign and be prosecuted?
So, Senator, I don't know if a complaint was formally made to the EEOC. That is the federal agency
But
that
you can
oversees
initiate
sexual
complaints. You're the
Okay.
labor secretary, and I know from your behavior you believe in protecting employees. Now, this This is as egregious as I've ever seen, and I suspect you've ever seen. And I thought we'd already decided that this is no country for creepy old men. I'm asking you what you're planning. Are you going to call for Martin Gruenberg, who runs the place, to resign? He's been there since 2005, and one or two things are going on. If he says he didn't know about it, he's like a rock, only dumber. Or he condoned this behavior. For the Biden administration, does Me Too apply except at the FDIC? Is that what you're saying?
No, Senator. I mean, I have seen some pretty horrible things. I mean, we see human trafficking and people forced to work in unconscionable conditions.
Yes, ma'am, but what are you going to do about the FDIC?
So,
and how are you going to protect those employees?
Well, they definitely deserve protection. This is where the Department of Labor's authority over the Fair Labor Standards Act, the OSH Act, and other things, the sexual harassment claims that you were talking about fall under a different federal agency. And
so you're just going to ignore it?
No, I mean, but I think that it's important for agencies to operate under the authority that they've been given by Congress.
Don't you
one reason I think I didn't know.
You have a moral imperative to ask Mr. Gruenberg to resign, to quit?
I would say this, Senator. I would say, I think you said that a complaint had been made. I'm assuming it was made to the proper federal agency. I trust that our sister
not yet,
agencies.
But they're coming. I'm just asking you what you're planning on doing, if anything. It doesn't sound to me like you're planning on doing anything to help these young female employees.
Well, now that you've brought it to my attention, I'm happy to make sure that the EOC is aware that there is a case like this.
But you're not going to do anything about it as Labor Secretary.
Well, let me say this, Senator. I know that the people of America need a very strong Department of Labor to protect working people across this country. Our authority to investigate, to cite, to end bad labor practices are bound by the authority that's given by you to me. These investigations occur at another agency.
You're not going to do anything, are you?
Oh, I just said I'm happy to reach out to them to make sure they're aware of it, and if they need any support that I'm able to give.
Your power to help those employees.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. We're going to begin a second round of questions. I do understand some members who were here earlier are trying to return for their opportunity to do their first round. For far too long, many Americans were denied health coverage for life-saving mental health services. I was proud to support bipartisan legislation that requires private health insurance companies to cover mental health and substance use disorder, just like they cover physical health. The Department of Labor plays a critical oversight role in securing parity compliance in employment-based health plans covering an estimated 131 million plan participants. Supplemental appropriations Congress provided to help implement this legislation will be exhausted by the end of the year. These funds have helped the department address parity violations, hold companies accountable, and facilitate access to treatment. Acting Secretary Sue, how would additional resources requested in this budget help the department's Employee Benefits Security Administration improve access to substance use disorder treatments that Wisconsinites and communities across the United States need to help overcome the crisis that claimed more than 100,000 American lives in the year 2022?
Chairwoman Baldwin, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. Today is actually National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day, and this month is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. And at the Department of Labor, we play a very important role on making sure that individuals who need mental health services, substance use disorder treatment, actually get the coverage from the insurance company that they're supposed to get. Our EBSA that does this enforcement, our Employee Benefit Security Administration, the budget request there is an increase of $14.6 million. Again, in order to stay under the Fiscal Responsibility Act cap that was there, and in order to continue to do enforcement, as you mentioned, in a field that is so important, but in which the funding that was given is about to sunset. I just want to share a few examples of the kinds of enforcement that we do here. We have, I've spoken to several parents whose children needed some kind of mental health treatment, and they were denied coverage for it. And so sometimes it means that a family will simply forego the treatment, often with devastating results. Sometimes families will do everything they can, including get a second mortgage on their home, right? Go into great debt in order to pay what is needed. We had a case in which a child needed inpatient mental health care. The family took out a second mortgage for it and ended up paying over $200,000 out of pocket. Because of the Department of Labor's intervention, we got that amount covered by insurance, which, the families will tell us that it's basically life-saving work. We have benefits advisors who answer the phone when somebody is being denied coverage, and sometimes that intervention will result in immediate change. This is life-saving work. And oftentimes, the impact of one enforcement effort has ripple effects, because once the insurance company recognizes what they're supposed to do in that one instance in which we got involved, they will change the way that they approach future requests for coverage, and then that has each of our investigations is amplified in terms of its impact. And so I can't overstate the importance of the work of EBSA, especially in this moment where we are seeing, 1 in 5 adults report a mental health issue a year. And for young people, I don't even know if the data is fully available. So I can't overstate the importance of building up EBSA in order to continue this work.
Thank you. Give her a moment to get adjusted, and then I will recognize Senator Britt.
Thank you very much. Just got finished with banking and headed down, so thank you. I appreciate it. Acting Secretary Sue, thank you for being here today. I wanted to begin by expressing my concern about the length of time the Biden administration has allowed the Department of Labor to operate without a Senate-confirmed secretary at the helm. As you were aware, your nomination to be the Secretary of Labor is opposed in a bipartisan majority of the Senate, and you will not be confirmed to this position during this Congress. Despite that reality and repeated requests to the President to put forth a nominee who can receive adequate support to be confirmed, the Biden administration has instead left you in place as acting secretary on an indefinite basis with no current plans to put forth another nominee for Secretary of Labor. You've also been listed on the White House website as a member of the cabinet, quote, in order of succession to the presidency, signaling that despite having never been elected to any office nor confirmed by the Senate to any cabinet level position, the White House believes that you are eligible to assume the presidency pursuant to the Presidential Succession Act of 1974. In October, I led a letter to President Biden along with 29 of my colleagues, urging that the White House clarify its position on this very issue. I've yet to receive a response to that letter, and so I want to raise that question with you today. Do you believe that if the need were to arise, that you are currently eligible to assume the presidency under the Presidential Succession Act of 1974?
Senator, it is the honor of a lifetime to have been nominated by the president to serve in his cabinet.
Absolutely. And do you believe that you are in the line of presidential succession?
So prior to being nominated, I was confirmed as the Deputy Secretary of Labor in 2021. And then when my predecessor left, I became the acting secretary through the normal...
Yes, ma'am, I'm aware. My question is, do you believe that you should be in the presidential line of succession? It's just a yes or a no.
I mean, Senator, I put it this way. I serve at the pleasure of the president. I appreciate his confidence in me. We've spent some time here today talking about the work of the department and the important ways that we are
This is my question is specifically about the presidential line of succession. Do you believe, yes or no, that you should be in that, having not been confirmed to this position by the United States Senate? So just, yes, you believe you should be able to succeed in the presidential line of succession if that were ever to happen, or no, you believe you are not actually in that line of succession?
Can I say two things about that, Senator? The first is that
well,
the question of...
Yeah, I actually have a lot of questions I want to get to on this, but I thought that would be a really easy yes or no, and to me it's no. You haven't been confirmed and therefore should not be in the line of succession. I mean, this is a big deal, and I think that's a simple answer, and unfortunately I didn't get that from you. Like many other of my colleagues, I've been very concerned about a number of rules that have been issued by the Department of Labor during your tenure, starting with the new overtime rule, and I know we've discussed that a bit today. The new rule increases the minimum salary threshold for the executive, administrative, or professional overtime exemption by 65% from the 2019 rule, and increases the minimum salary threshold for a highly compensated employee overtime exemption by 41% from the 2019 rule. I've heard from numerous stakeholders in Alabama about the huge detrimental impact that this rule will have on them. As an example, many of Alabama's small colleges and universities, which include HBCUs. We have more HBCUs in Alabama than any other place in the nation. And as I hear from them about dealing with this, it is going to have significant ramifications. My office has spoken to schools that don't have large budgets or endowments, but are facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional costs for the upcoming academic year, having to implement this rule and reevaluate salaries across the board due to this rule's provisions. At the same time, those schools are unable to lock down their incoming freshman classes or fully make informed decisions and budgetary choices about the upcoming academic year. And if you look at that, this rule is obviously having a huge impact in addition to all of those things in small businesses in Alabama. And to me, small businesses are the heartbeat of this country. They're what make main streets go. They're what allow people to achieve the American dream. And given these realities, do you, at the very least, envision the department granting additional flexibility with respect to the timing of this rule's implementation across the country?
So, Senator, I agree with what you said about the importance of small businesses in our economy. There's no question about that. And we engage with small businesses in all of our rulemaking, but also in our overtime rule. In terms of the timing, actually...
And they're supportive of that?
We got comments on all sides. We got, I think I said this, over 33,000 comments on overtime. I believe that's the right number for that particular rule. And we do hear from small businesses who rely on the Department of Labor to create a level playing field on which they can compete, especially in a moment where they need to recruit and retain, keep workers by making sure that their working conditions are competitive. But let me just address the timing, because that is one of the things, and the ranking member and I already talked about this some, is we heard comments about the need for some time to come into compliance. So our overtime rule goes into effect in two phases. The first is on July 1st. It will go up, it's a bump based on the current methodology, not the new methodology, but the current rule multiplied by current wage levels. The other bump, the bump of the 35th percentile in the new rule, is going to go into effect on January 1st of 2025.
I hope you'll take these things into consideration, and I am obviously out of time, but I heard my colleague from New Hampshire mention there is a big cost of living difference, as she mentioned, from in New Hampshire and Boston. When you look at the low cost of living in Alabama, there is a detrimental effect that occurs, and I hope that you will take all of those things into account. So thank you very much for your time today.
If I could just also say, the way our formula works does take that into account, and I'm happy to follow up if you want to hear more about that.
Thank you, Senator Britt. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Acting Secretary, I want to ask about ESG because I mentioned that in my opening statement. So in 2022, the Employee Benefits Security Administration issued a final rule under ERISA that allows plan fiduciaries to consider climate change, environmental, social, and governance factors when making investment decisions. What brought that decision forward, and was that a requirement from the president to have an all throughout every department consideration of climate change? Because as we look at, say, the Social Security Trust Fund, which a lot of people are going to be relying on for retirement, and also their retirement plans, in my view, the best way to keep our retirees as they move into their senior years in the best possible position is to have the maximum financial benefit accrue to their plans, regardless of, I could see if things were illegal, but if you're talking about a natural gas company or a coal company or somebody else who's really maximizing profits, this rule would, if that fiduciary takes this under consideration, would eliminate that as a possibility.
So, Ranking Member, I very much appreciate both the question and the way in which you asked it, because I agree, and of course, it's best for retirees for their investments to give them the maximum financial benefit.
Right.
All of our work, our enforcement work, as well as our rulemaking is about that. This particular rule is consistent with that in that it does not mandate, but it does allow an investor to take into account ESG factors, especially because, and I was just in a meeting about this with many investors who actually make these decisions, sometimes when those factors, labor principles, right, environmental, valuing environmental outcomes, those factors actually make an investment more profitable. And so what our rule did, the prior administration took away the ability to consider those factors, said that you can't look at them. Our rule restores the ability for someone who's making those decisions to look at all of the factors that will help them to decide what is going to be best for the actual retiree.
In my opinion, this really politicizes a really important part of our financial fabric in this country. And I think that the pressures, you didn't answer the question as to whether the pressure to move forward with this rule came from the White House or from the financial institutions. Are you aware that there are a lot of ESG funds that have actually shuttered, closed down, because they're not generating the profits that they need? So who made the decision to move forward on this? Was this a decision you made, or the former head of labor, or was it made in the White House?
Well, so Ranking Member, if I could just say again, respond
answer that.
The politicization occurred in the prior administration when it said you cannot consider them. The point about being able to consider all factors is something that we heard from those people, financial advisors, those making those decisions, that they wanted to be able to consider all factors, but because of the prior administration's rule, they were afraid to do that, even when it would be in the best interest of the accounts, in which it would result in the maximum investment return. So our rule was really about more flexibility. In terms of who made the decision, again, we went through the process for rulemaking that we always go through. We are thoughtful, we are judicious, we take comments, we listen to them, we respond to them, and then we produce something that we believe is in the best interests of, in this case, not just the account holders, but also those who asked for more flexibility in their decision making.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here. Recently, the President vetoed a bipartisan congressional resolution overturning the National Labor Relations Board NLRB rule, redefining who is a joint employer. The rule from NLRB will put the franchise model at risk, and I think you know how I feel about this. Small businesses are the heart of the economy in our communities, especially in our little state of West Virginia, which we love dearly, where more than 98% of our businesses are small businesses. 1 out of every 3 franchise owners say they wouldn't own a small business without the franchise business model. That's a tremendous 1 in 3, 33%. The last time NLRB tried this study, a study found that the policy led to 376,000 fewer jobs and $33 billion in lost output across the economy. Well, a federal judge has currently blocked this rule from taking effect. I'm concerned what will happen if it does take effect. So my question would be, there continues to be bipartisan concern with what the NLRB is proposing. What does your department plan to do to curb the job and economic output loss we experienced the last time, if this would go into effect, and are you all still pushing it for it to be effective?
So, Senator, it's nice to see you. I know everybody knows, but I will say this. The NLRB is a separate entity from the Department of Labor. The joint employer rule is not something that the Department of Labor has pursued or that we have put on our regulatory agenda. I will say, one of the things—
We tried to get rid of it, but the president he vetoed us. The president overrode us. You know, we tried to get rid of it, but he vetoed it. So he must believe, and the administration must believe, in the rule the way the rule's been.
Yeah, that is not a rule that the Department of Labor pursued or put into effect. I will say those—
Do you acknowledge the job? Can you acknowledge the job losses that came when they did implement it the last time?
I mean, Senator, I don't have any data about that, but I will acknowledge the conversations we have had and the important role that franchisees and franchisors played. I know we've talked about this too.
Sure.
My own parents owned a franchisee business, and so I understand and have lived the benefits that such a business creates for—
If you would do me a favor with your able staff here, if they would just check and find out if that's accurate, the amount of jobs that we know have been lost before, or our statistics show us, and the amount of revenue it's caused to our economy, then maybe that would make the president and his administration take a different look at this in a different way. We're very hopeful.
I mean, Senator, I know you know this, but since the president came into office, 15.4 million jobs have been added to the economy, at the same time that the unemployment rate remains very low. It's been under 4% for 27 months straight. I know that's already been said as well. So we are in a moment of tremendous job creation, in no small part due to the investments that are being made through the president's Investing in America agenda, which this body was obviously very critical in helping to make possible.
And the bills that we all passed in a bipartisan way, and even the IRA bill, the way it's being implemented is different than the way we wrote it. So there's going to be a lot of legal cases that they're going to lose, because they're overstepping their boundary of how they're implementing. And I've said this many, many times. You're trying to implement a bill you never passed. I know the bills because we wrote them. We all worked on them. We wrote the bills. We know what they are in them. And they're expanding those to a position that it's going to exasperate the position we've taken. Bring manufacturing back to America. You can't bring manufacturing back if you relax the rules on where you get your critical minerals and where you produce them. And if you allow China to keep doing, all you're doing is promoting China's dominance in the market. One final question was this. Department of Labor's Schedule A shortage occupation list was designed to address workforce shortages by streamlining the process of hiring vetted international workers in high-demand industries like science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, and also healthcare. Schedule A is an important tool that exempts workers in understaffed industries from bureaucratic visa hurdles and backlogs. Despite having the authority to revise the Schedule A list, the department has not updated it to include more than 2 specific occupations, professional nurses and physical therapists since 2005. While the department has not updated the list in over 20 years, I was pleased to see the request for information, RFI, on how the Schedule A occupation list could be modernized to include STEM occupations for which there is a demonstrated labor shortage. So what is the department's timeline to provide an updated on Schedule A list? I'm glad you are taking it serious.
Yes, so that's what I was going to say. We did do an RFI on this to figure out exactly what we needed to do, and I can certainly get back to you more with the timeline. I thought, Senator, you were going to ask me about a rule that you had wanted to get done that we did get over the finish line, which is I was in Uniontown, Pennsylvania recently to announce our silica rule, which is going to save thousands of lives and prevent thousands of injuries for mine workers.
Let me thank you for that.
But we didn't get to talk about it.
I'm so sorry. I want to thank you for that because it did help. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. So that will end our hearing.
I would like my second round.
Senator Kennedy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Madam Acting Secretary, thank you for being here. I'm a little confused by some of your answers, but I think we've made some progress. I think we've established, number one, that many supervisors and some members of the senior leadership at the FDIC are pigs. They are sexual predators. They are bigots. Number two, this issue has been out there for some time, since the Wall Street Journal broke the story, at least 6 months. And so far, the Department of Labor has said nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. In fact, I think you said you haven't even read the reports and aren't familiar with the issue. Maybe I'm overstating it. If I am, correct me. Number three, Madam Secretary, you have a long history that I know you're proud of passionate activism on behalf of employees. So here's my question. Are you or are you not going to use your legal authority and moral authority to open an investigation of the FDIC and help those young women over there and help those young people of color over there?
Senator, I am deeply concerned anytime a working person goes to work and does not get the dignity and respect that they deserve. I am charged with enforcing certain laws based on the powers that Congress has given to the Department of Labor. I appreciate that you are raising an issue involving working people who have experienced clearly horrific sexual harassment and other kinds of abuse. And what it demonstrates is that too often workers may feel like they have to endure things that no one should have to endure because of a power imbalance in the workplace.
Excuse me for interrupting, and I'm sorry, but I've only had 5 minutes. Are you going to do anything about it? That's all I'm asking. If you're not, just tell me.
I mean, I answered the question about what, there's an agency in the federal government who presumably, if the complaint has been made,
You're not going to do anything about it?
we'll be investigating it.
But you're not going to take any, in light of, I mean, this is gut check time for you, Madam Acting Secretary. You either believe in protecting workers or you don't. I can't believe you would just, we can debate how many lawyers can dance on the head of a pin, but you certainly have legal and moral authority to investigate labor violations.
I mean,
I'm honestly surprised. I thought you would pounce on this like a ninja. I thought you'd say,
like a what?
Like a ninja. Pounce on it like a ninja. I've heard that expression in movies before. I thought you were going to say, Kennedy, I'm on it. This is the most disgusting stuff I've ever heard in my life, in the history of ever. But you're kind of waffling on me, like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me ask you my last question, because I'm going to run out of time. Are you or are you not going to call for Martin Gruenberg, who runs the FDIC and has been there since God was a corporal, and the senior leadership over there to resign?
So, Senator, I do care about working people. That is why I am here with a budget request of $13.9 billion for the Department of Labor to do what we do, to combat wage theft, to stop child labor, to make sure every worker goes home healthy and safe at the end of the day, to expand apprenticeship programs. In fact, we have a Youth Apprenticeship Week that's happening right now for the first time ever because young people should see themselves in the opportunities that are being built right now. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and we are making sure that we're expanding access for teachers to good jobs. We are hard at work to deliver for the workers of America within the job that the Department of Labor is supposed to do, enforcing mental health parity, making sure that workers who save their whole life for retirement actually have the benefits that they have saved for. Those are all within our budget requests because those are all within the work of the department.
You're flip-flopping like a banked cat.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Are you not going to answer my question? I mean, are you going to call for him to resign or not?
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. The Subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and related agencies will adjourn shortly. I want to thank my fellow committee members for a thoughtful conversation. I want to thank you, Acting Secretary Sue. For any senators who wish to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due by May 16th. The hearing record will also remain open until then for members who wish to submit additional materials for the record. And now the subcommittee will stand in recess.